Hey everybody, this is Jackie Luqman, and today is Sunday, July 8th, and we are here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We are at 2nd and K Streets Northeast. As you can see behind me, probably the thing that you notice first and the most is the new construction that's going on. This is a result of gentrification, a lot of development going on in this neighborhood. This is an area that used to be predominantly black, predominantly working class, and now this area is changing very, very drastically, transitioning to a more wealthy, whiter neighborhood. So there's a lot of construction, office buildings, high-end condos going on, being erected in this neighborhood. But I hope you don't dismiss the other thing that's behind me, the other very stark, in contrast, part of this rapidly changing, massive development going on in this neighborhood. I hope you don't miss that row of tents behind me that abuts, that are up against this old railroad trestle. It's actually not old. Amtrak still uses it because the Amtrak office and depot, Union Station, is just down the street on 1st Street. I hope you don't miss that in the backdrop and in stark contrast to the rapid development that's going on, not just in this building over here, but there's another building that's being erected further down the street, and there's a big crane behind that building with a big old American flag hanging from the crane. That in front of all this progress, there are people living on the street. There are people living in tents. And these are just the few that are outside of the tunnel. There are more human beings, there are more Americans, there are more people living in tents inside of the tunnel. Now, my husband and I, a couple of years ago, volunteered, and I hate to say volunteer because nobody asked us to do it, it's just something we do. We saw a community of people who were homeless. They had a tent encampment in a park not far from here. So we got a bunch of people together and decided, let's go feed these people. Let's go reach out to them. And we did. We got some food together, and we took food to this encampment that was in this park. Well, Mayor Muriel Bowser, the Democratic black female mayor of D.C., decided that that tent encampment was an eyesore. And the city moved those people somewhere. And we couldn't figure out where a lot of those people went because we wanted to go back and check on our folks. Well, we found where some of them went. And some of the people ended up here. And there was another tent encampment not far from here, a couple blocks over. Some people ended up there, and some people ended up in other places, very much like this. Out of the way, out of the public eye, out of sight, and what they want you to believe, out of mind. But in Luqman Nation, we don't pay attention to the narrative that people want us to pay attention to because, see, the powers that be want you to ignore this. They want you to ignore those people who have no other housing other than a tent. One of our friends, Nore Shoemake, raises money to buy tents, $20 a pop for people. And she sends some of that money to our friend, Ian Robel, out in California, who buys tents for people he meets on the streets out in California. And we talked the other day about the rising homelessness crisis in California. We're not talking about people who have made bad decisions. We're not talking about the dregs of society. We're talking about human beings. And when we're talking about a situation where people are so desperate and at the end of their rope that the only way they have to live is to live in a tent in a city where we're building high-rises up and down the block, but none of these people can afford to live in them. And honestly, to tell you the truth, none of these people living in these houses, if they didn't own these houses, they couldn't afford to live there either. when it comes to the point where this is the only option people have left, how they got there isn't even an issue. It should never be an issue. We are the richest nation in the world. We still are. It's just that the people who have most of the money, they're not giving it up for people like me. They're not giving it up. They're not sharing it with people like you. And they're certainly not sharing it with people like them. So it's down to people like us who will take a Sunday out, take some time out of a Sunday coming from church. Because my husband drives trucks and he's working down here during the day, and he said, hey, I think I found where some of our friends who were in that homeless encampment went. We have to let people know these people are out here. It takes people like Nore Shomig. It takes people like Ian Robel doing a little bit that we can do for a population that is growing of people who are so desperate that this is all they have left. Not enough decent jobs, and that's not even true. Not enough pay, not enough decent pay at the jobs that are available so that people can afford decent housing. In whatever city they live in, whether it's here in Washington, D.C. or San Diego, California, where rent for a one-bedroom apartment out there is $1,800. Over here, depending on what part of the city you're looking for that one-bedroom apartment, it could be as high as $2,200 a month, excluding utilities. It comes down to people like you and me and Nore and Ian and everybody who donated $20. We did a couple times, and we encourage you to continue to do that. I'll give you the link for Nore's PayPal for that fundraiser because it's desperately needed. But it comes down to people like us taking time out on a Sunday afternoon in between leaving church and going shopping for kitchen drapes, which is what we're going to do. But understanding that even we are fortunate, and there's no way we can pass this by.
I think one of the things that really is heartbreaking to me is that when we came down here, the amount of people who are riding bikes, walking, and just riding around, and no one appears to be upset about this.
No.
Like it's I'm watching people walk by and they're basically just like these people are invisible. It's like they're just part of the landscape. You know? I mean, folks are riding by in cars. No one seems to be concerned that we live in a country with this type of disparity. No, because the people who have the money to be able to live in those kinds of buildings, they don't care where these people go. As long as they can afford their comfort, they don't have a concern for the people who have nothing. And they honestly don't care how many more tents accumulate out here. You know why? Because they know they can always call the cops. And they know they can always complain to the city and the powers that be. And the police will do the bidding of the city and round these people with nothing up and push them off somewhere else so that those people don't have to look at them. Now, just as an update, because like you said, that building in the back is one of the buildings that I work at. Right. You know, and that's how we were able to find out about this. Now, just to show you how quickly this problem is that I worked at this building just maybe a week ago, a week and a half ago, and none of these tents were here. Wow, none of them were here. Not on this side, just inside the tunnel. But on this side here, there was none of these tents. This just happened. So the people who are on the outside of this tunnel, and I hope you guys can see, let me move out of the way, so you can see it's not just these 1, 2, 3, 4 tents here. On this side of the street, when you cross the street, it's like 2 or 3 more tents, and then further down the block, there are 2 or 3 more tents. There's another entrance to the tunnel that way, and there are more tents inside the tunnel down there.
So these people you said weren't even here last week.
They weren't.
And please explain to the people what you do when you say you work at this building. What do you do?
Well, I'm a dump truck driver. So all of the dirt when they dig the foundation out to erect these buildings, I haul the dirt out and take it to the landfills and the dumps. So that's what I do. Or I bring the stone material that they need to lay the foundation. So that's what I do. I transport dirt, transport materials, whatever they need me to do transportation wise. So we have the company I work for. We have a few contracts, and this is one of the contracts that we have is this building over across the street. And these are going to be high-end condos. They're going to be starting out like 1 bedroom going for like $3,000 a month.
Right. Right.
1 bedroom, $3,000 a month.
So you telling me last week or week before last about some of the experiences you had at some of the construction sites, and this is how I need for my husband to tell you all this story, because I know that even some people watching, you may feel bad about the people out here who are living in tents, but let us explain to you how close you are to being exactly like them, or a better way to put it is how much exactly like those people, the people who live in these kinds of buildings, think that we all are. So what happens when you show up at a job site early before the job site opens in some places?
Well, for example, when because there's so much building going on, a lot of these buildings are being erected in areas, residential areas that's already gentrified.
Right.
And so what happens is we come in the morning, and the first thing we get harassed by the police because the residents call the cops because we're there now. Our job site, we used to start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's been pushed back because residents complained about trucks being visible. Now, has nothing to do with the noise, because DC ordinance already says that you can't have a truck idle for more than 3 minutes.
And all truck drivers know this.
Yeah, so the truck's off.
Right.
So it's just that it's not, it doesn't look good. So then they call the police. The police moves us. So then they set our time back to 7. We used to start at 6, now it's 7, which means we get off later on the day. So now it's at 7, and so what happens is we have to disappear until it's time for us to be loaded. We can't be seen. The work site supervisor will come to us and say, find somewhere to park, but you can't park around here. And what happens is that we waste fuel because we have to find places to park.
Right.
DC is becoming more and more congested. So it's more and more difficult to find parking areas. And if we come around, the police will write us $1,000 tickets. And
that ticket has to be paid by the driver.
By the driver.
Not the company.
Right. Because there is no designated parking spaces for construction trucks to be, when the site opens up. So if the police or DOT comes around, then what happens is they write $1,000 tickets, which just happened about a month ago when 7 drivers who, with no fault of their own, that were MPD wrote them because the owner of the building they were parked in front of called the police. When the drivers tried to leave, the police wouldn't let them leave because they already came on the scene. And each driver, I think it was 7 of them, got like a ticket that was like $1,000. Now the average wage we make on a given day is about maybe $200, maybe a little over $200, give or take. So $1,000 ticket, I mean,
that's somebody's whole paycheck. That's a whole paycheck. That's a truck driver's whole paycheck for the week. That is a truck driver's paycheck. That is a family's groceries.
Right.
That is part of somebody's rent for that month.
But this is the thing, because these areas have become more affluent, more whiter, and everything else. They are able to use the police as a weapon against us. Now, where you and I live at, where they have a major construction site.
Right, and there are truck drivers all over the place. Right. They're parked all over the place.
Exactly. There's a different attitude. No one calls. No one complains. The cops don't harass us.
Right.
And anything like that, because there's a different understanding where we live at. And let's just be honest. The police are not as responsive to the complaints from people in our ward than they are to people out here.
Exactly. So we have a situation where if you believe that because you have a job and you're pretty reasonably gainfully employed, that people in these gentrified areas aren't going to look down on you and treat you as if you are nothing, and would rather you be not seen so they can have this out of sight, out of mind attitude about working people. If you think they're not going to treat you that way, my husband is living proof that that's not true. See, some of these people, and I don't want to demonize all the people who can afford to live in a nice condo. That's not the issue. The issue is the political mechanisms behind what needs to be done in order to move the people who have already been here out of these areas to make way for wealthier people who don't care about the people who already live here, and what happens to those people who can't afford to stay. Those are the problems. And then it becomes a problem when you do have wealthier people who move into the neighborhood who use the police in order to control the behavior and actions of the poorer people who already live in the neighborhood. That's the problem with gentrification. And then, of course, what we see here are the absolute extremes. But here's the problem with that. This isn't an absolute extreme anymore. This is becoming the norm. And when you don't challenge the attitudes that people have toward working people,
and specifically blue-collar workers.
And specifically blue-collar.
These folks that afford it, they work.
They work, but see, they work in nice office jobs, and they have degrees, a lot of them, so they make a lot of good money. These are the things that they say. These are the code words that they use to justify them treating people who have less education, less money, as if they are lesser human beings than they are.
Yeah, none of them built that. None of them is building that.
It takes the blue-collar worker. It takes the blue-collar construction worker to build that. The architect with his advanced degrees can sit at his drafting table and draw the designs, but he can't get out here and pour that cement. Do you understand? The architects, they can sit there and brainstorm on this, beautiful brick and steel and whatever else is made of that building construction, but they can't weld the beams together.
Right.
They can't get out here and operate the backhoes that will dig the foundations. And they're not going to drive the trucks that take the excavated materials out of the pit so that they can build into it.
Yep.
But the people who do all that work, the blue-collar workers who do all that work, the cement truck drivers, the welders, the masons who lay the bricks, the laborers who clean up the site so that people aren't tripping over stuff and killing themselves, the truck drivers who drive the debris away and bring the equipment and the materials in, the people who will live in this building and who have inhabited these areas, they treat those people like garbage, but it's those people who are building the fortresses to their wealth. And if we believe that the only fight we have as working people in this country, as leftists, as people of conscience, as people of faith, if we think the only fight we have in this country is to fight for people who are already at the very bottom and at the outside, we've got it very wrong. We are also fighting for our own respect as working people. We're in a fight together with them.
Yeah, I just want to while we're doing it, I want to take a little quick tour. I want you to talk.
Okay.
And I just want to, because I want folks to know the severity of what's happening in the nation's capital, in the richest country in the world. Yeah,
and let me just make it clear that when we, like I said, we were on our way. When we leave here, we're going to think about what we can do to help people. Right. And we're not going to film people because people deserve their dignity. We sat in the car before we came here. We kind of thought about how are we going to do this, because we don't want to disrespect people's privacy. People deserve their dignity. This is not a zoo. We don't want to like make this an exhibition. This isn't like the poverty exhibition.
Exactly.
That's not what we're trying to do.
And I'm glad you mentioned the poverty expedition, because this is the Poor People's Campaign is still going on.
Yes.
Even though there are concerted efforts by the media and others to not pay attention to it, to black it out per se, or white it out, I should say.
Right. Right.
But there, there's not much attention paid on it, and this is the reason why it is important to support the Poor People's Campaign, to organize and bring some justice to these situations, because this is injustice. There is no reason why that we can spend as much money as we do on military equipment, that we can spend as much money on war and stuff, and yet can't provide basic stuff for citizens of this country.
A decent place for people to live?
Right.
No, we can do that. So, we have people's living spaces. And you can see that people are out here trying to make the best of the situation that they can. There's food out. Some people have come out, obviously, and helped feed people, and that's great to see. People have left. And this is what you can do in your city, by the way. This is a great idea. Get some care packages together. You don't even have to bother people, because a lot of people are so ashamed. So you just a little package of clean socks, toiletries.
Especially feminine hygiene products.
Feminine hygiene products are desperately needed in homeless shelters and for people who are, as the British call it, living rough. All right? So I think that's a great idea. And I'm glad to see that these people are not forgotten. Somebody does care. It's not just us, and a lot of people want credit for the good stuff they do, right? A lot of people want to come out and they want to do a live stream and show people, oh look, I'm being look, either you're going to do it or you're not. So sometimes it's good to just do things for people because it's the right thing to do. Credit isn't necessary. We don't know who the people are who left these little care packages for these people.
And it's not important. And
it's not important. It's just good to know that somebody sees them. Somebody sees these people. And they thought enough about them to take the time to put those little packages together and leave them for them. That's enough.
Go through this tunnel.
Yeah, so let's go down here. And I'm going to try to, it's dark, so I'm going to see, if I can provide a little bit of light. Maybe we need to, it's good? Okay. All right, good. So as you can see, there are more people here. And unfortunately, there's someone out.
It'll be all right.
Yeah, do you want to check?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Just check it. Make sure you're okay. Just make sure you're all right. Cigarette, I'll bring one back. I'm not sweet. I'll bring one back for you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me go first around the pole. Now, unfortunately, this is the kind of scene you can see in almost every major city in the United States. And I have to tell you that I was thinking, like growing up in the country, we always knew people who were poorer than us, but it seemed like everybody at least had a shack that they could live in, some abandoned house or something that they could take over to at least lay their head in. Do you mean to tell me we can't provide anything? We can't provide anything in a city where this government made billions of dollars off of traffic camera enforcement alone. You mean to tell me we can't provide a safe and clean place for people to lay their heads? Bullshit. There's just no other word for that. That's bullshit. That's bullshit because that's greed. That's greed and elected officials not wanting to help people. They want to push people out of sight so they can be out of mind until they get all this development done and they can come up with a plan to move these people out of the city altogether. And again, if we think that it's not working people and poor people, that it's a part of that plan to be moved out of this city just because we're not homeless yet, think again. That's what gentrification is. It's pushing everybody who can't afford to support the higher tax base out of this city. That's why we have to fight for these people, because we're next.
Many of us are just a paycheck away from being this.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't get sick. Do your job.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. I mean, as fortunate as we are, let's be honest, y'all. Let's be honest, friends. The Luqmans are pretty fortunate. We've let you see our little backyard. A couple of you have visited our home. We're not rich people. We're working people. But we've been fortunate. We also understand that we are so very close to this. You know, we're fortunate that we have family. If anything terrible happened, if we had a catastrophic anything, if my husband lost his job, if I lost my job, if we got sick and we couldn't work, we have family that can help, but our family isn't rich, so they can only help so much. So, you know, we're looking at, even as working people, we're looking at if we have a catastrophe, we better hope and pray that catastrophe only lasts 6 months. We better be able to get back on our feet quick. But we understand that life doesn't work that way. So part of the reason we fight so hard, for justice, part of the reason we are so focused on it, I'm going to be honest, it's selfish. Yeah, because I'm tired of living scared. Aren't you? I'm tired of living afraid that I'm going to lose the house if I lose my job. I'm tired of feeling like if somebody disrespects me on my job, I have to watch what I say because they could fire me. And then what am I going to do? Tired of living like that, aren't you? Nobody should have to live under that stress. I'm tired of being afraid of if somebody calls the police on my husband when he's doing his job, what if the wrong cop shows up that day? You know, what if they get him on a day when he's not in such a great mood and they're not so patient? I'm tired of living afraid of natural catastrophes. Oh my God, what if I go to the doctor and because of the history of cancer that we have in my family, what if I get diagnosed one day? Do I have enough health insurance? What if I have to have treatment? Blah, blah, blah. And then on top of this other stuff, can we be real honest, friends, that if we're really honest with ourselves, having to live like this is a fear that a lot of us have. And if we didn't know how close many of us are to it, it wouldn't be something we were afraid of. Aren't you tired of being afraid that through no fault of your own, you would have nothing? And nobody would help you? That's why we fight so hard. That's why this is personal for us. Part of it is selfish. Yeah, that I don't want to live the next 40 years of my life in a country that doesn't care that its citizens are sleeping on the street like this. Do you?
just on this side of me, right across the street there, you can see another encampment right across the street.
Look at this, a wheelchair. Whoever is here isn't healthy. Isn't healthy. Probably needs some kind of medical attention. Couldn't get it, and they're out here on the street. Do you want to keep living in a country that allows people to live like this? Now, listen. Okay, let's also be honest about some other things, right? Because we are talking about issues sometimes where there's mental health issues and substance abuse issues. And you can't make people go to a shelter if they don't want to. Can't make people go places they don't want to. But the fact that there is nowhere for these people to go. There's nowhere that isn't already overcrowded in this city. That's why people are out here. Nobody grows up and decides, I want to live in a tent when I'm an adult. Just like nobody grows up and decides, I want to be an alcoholic, or I want to be a drug addict, or I want to be mentally unstable. We used to have St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, in Southeast DC, in my neighborhood, where we live, where I grew up. It was the oldest and the largest, it was the oldest federally funded mental institution in the country. It used to be a Civil War hospital. And I knew people who were having a difficult time mentally. And they would literally walk into the front gates of St. Elizabeth's Hospital and say, look, I need some help. And be able to be checked in, get treatment, and be released. They could self-commit, get whatever treatment they needed because it was federally funded, and be released and go on with their lives. We know people who are recovering addicts, who got treatment, drug addiction treatment, at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And who say that if it was not for their ability to get treatment at St. Elizabeth's, now, we can argue about the quality of the treatment. We certainly can. But the fact that people had somewhere to go to get mental health help, to get substance abuse help, that gave them the ability to experience some kind of return to some type of stability in their life. That doesn't exist anymore because the federal government cut the funding for places like St. Elizabeth's, not just in DC, but all around the country where mental health, federally funded mental health facilities existed. And when the federal budget for those facilities was drastically cut, they couldn't house and feed and medicate their patients 24 hours on a 24-hour basis anymore. They couldn't provide any more of these free services, substance abuse treatment services, or outpatient mental health services. They couldn't afford those things anymore. So they had to let their nonviolent inpatients out because they couldn't afford to feed them, and hope that they would come back to get their medication, and they didn't. There was no more walk-in, self-committal, temporary or short-term outpatient treatment. There was no more inpatient substance abuse treatment. And this happened at the same time that crack hit the streets in most major cities across this country, predominantly black areas. And this also happened at the same time the federal government defunded summer school, summer youth employment programs and summer enrichment programs that impacted a lot of inner city neighborhoods across the country. This happened at the same time. So we have generations of people who are still suffering the effects of our government misappropriating our tax dollars. Not using our tax dollars for the benefit of us, the citizens. See, these people should be able to go to any federally funded facility in this city and get whatever help they need to help them cope with life a little bit better. But they have nothing. They have nothing. All they have left is whatever problems they have, a tent, and the streets.
And if we want to call ourselves a civilized society, any civilized society is only civilized when it takes care of the least amongst them.
Absolutely.
And the poorest amongst them.
Absolutely. And we are doing a horrific job.
Because it's not like we don't have the resources.
We're not a civilized society. The United States of America is not a civilized society. Not when we have the means, because we do have the means. The Democrats and the Republicans just got together to pass a $716 billion defense budget. That was a couple $100 billion increase over the last defense budget they got last year. President Obama signed a $1 trillion budget for enhancing the existing nuclear weapons arsenal. $1 trillion. The Department of Defense lost $7 trillion. Lost it. Have no idea what they did with it. We have the means. How we're going to pay for it isn't even a logical question.
No, that question only comes up when it's time to do something for the people.
Exactly.
When any time that we're trying to do something for the benefit of the citizenry, then cost is always brought up.
Right.
But when it's come to murder people overseas with this military, then we always will find a couple more dollars for that.
Then nobody ever asked how much it's going to cost to bomb Yemen. Nobody ever asked how much is it going to cost us to blow up an abandoned air base, to bomb an abandoned air base in Saudi Arabia. Nobody ever asked, how much money it's going to cost to open up another covert military base in Africa. Nobody ever asked us how much that's going to cost, but we always wonder how much it's going to cost to feed hungry people.
And nobody, and another thing too, there was no fiscal conservatives that ever raised hell about the $1 trillion upgrade to the nuclear weapons. Where was the fiscal conservatives on that? No, nobody was concerned about why we needed to upgrade nuclear weapons that already kill people quite efficiently, and why we don't need. Where we're going to get the $7 trillion, the $1 trillion to upgrade that. So, we're standing here, we're watching people, walk by, and I guess for some people it's just like, it's overwhelming and they feel like, what can they do? Listen, some of these folks are the same people who will call the police on somebody who is making too much noise outside of their new gentrified condo. People's priorities are what they are. We can only work within what we can control. We can control ourselves. We can control our response to things. And we can control the stories and the images and the messages that we put out under our name on our platform. But you know what's so sad is?
What?
Is that when these buildings are completed, they're going to get rid of these. They're going to get rid of these people here.
Yeah, they are. They're going to move them away. And the people who move into those buildings, they want them to move them away.
Right.
They want them to. So, I don't know. We're going to brainstorm and see what we can do on a lot of different fronts to help people as much as we can. But this is just another one of those things that it's just another example of the two Americas. I mean, there are more than two Americas. But the divided states of America, yeah, that's what we are. That's what we are. There is the evidence of wealth and economic progress all around these people. But it's only economic progress and wealth for a select few. These people have been left out. We're pretty close to being left out. And so are you. I guess our question is, what are you going to do about it? So thanks for watching. Join us next time.